All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your favorite dark sorcerer. Today, I'd like to discuss Satanism, witchcraft, demonolatry, and Sigiliums. And where should I begin here? Hey, Dragon. What's going on? All right. Where to begin? Well, throughout the last 100 years, if not 200 years, individuals have claimed Satanism for themselves. Each faction of Satanism or each denomination has declared that they are the originators, the originals. When in actuality, there is very few dealing with this. It is the same thing with witchcraft being associated with Wicca and paganism and Wiccan practices. Okay, now you got to keep in mind that Wicca is not Wiccan. There are two different factions. There are two different denominations. Okay, two different styles in themselves, two different belief systems, but with similar commonalities. Okay, but that's another video. It's a whole nother topic, so that's going. Okay, but anyways, when it comes to witchcraft, witches have been linked for the better part of 2,000 years, been associated with spirits such as demons and angels and the jinn and spirits of various different sorts. Now, one of the main controversies that you see on Facebook, I should really start lowering this thing down. There we go. But anyways, it's all right, I can get back to him later. Anyways, as I was saying, Satanism has been around for the better part of 200 years, give or take. Started with the ONA. Today, there's a lot of controversy over the ONA, the Order of the Nine Angles, as in being the originators. But if we go back into, for instance, what's his name there? Fanthrope's work, we see where there's been different formulations of Satanism throughout the centuries. Okay, and that's called Satanism and Demonolatry. Okay, and that's something that is very, very interesting in itself because of the fact that he's actually taken it back as far as Raymond Buckland did, back to the Paleolithic era, within witchcraft from the inside. Very, very interesting on Raymond Buckland's part in that book. But Fanthrope, on the other hand, utilized the Greek, the Roman, the Middle Eastern, and the Egyptian pantheons, right up into the Norse pantheons of Satanism and the various different outlooks on what was considered Satanism at the time. Okay, and he's actually talked a little bit about what could be classified as the earliest manifestations of Satanism in that book. So I do recommend you go out and get that book and really read it, because his insight, he brings up not only timetables, as in the era that the culture was in, but he also brought up dates and people. That's something you really do not see very much of within any formulation of works today. One of the other ones that really does put a lot of names, especially when it comes to witches and witchcraft and practitioners in general, was Reginald Scott in his book Discovery with Witchcraft, or Discovery of Witchcraft, rather. And discovery is actually spelled with an IE at the end, so keep that in mind. It's not a Y. And I've actually recommended this book to so many people, and they've come back. A few of them come back like, I can't find it. It's like, how did you spell it? And they're like, with a Y? But no, it's actually IE. But anyways, yeah, it's discovery is spelled with an IE because of the time and the era that it was written in. Okay, don't ask me why. That type of thing is out of my league. But that's just how it's spelled. The other one is by Nicholas Remy. Nicholas Remy wrote the book Demonolatry. Okay, an ancient and historical account of witchcraft. Not only did these two individuals put down items that were found on the witches at the time of their arrest and accusations and trials and such, but they also put in dates and the years, okay, and the time of the year in general, month, day, and year that these individuals were arrested, or I should say accused, arrested, tried, and convicted. Okay, but they also found on them what was literally found on their possessions, their grimoires, on how they associate with demons, angels, and such. Very fascinating book if you can actually stomach the whole patience thing and try to work your way through one of those dull books, because that's really what it is. It's a very dull book, and both of them are. But it's a very good read, especially from a historical point of view. The first time I read Demonolatry by Nicholas Remy, I couldn't believe how boring it was, but I got through it. And I've read it a couple times since then, and each time I've discovered something new that I had missed before. For an example, in chapter 1, there was actually 3 powders, which brings in herbalism and alchemy into it. Okay? 3 powders that were found on the witches themselves. Okay? Very fascinating. But today, I'd like to discuss not only these books here, but I've got a few that I pulled from my personal library. And I've got them sitting right next to me. And what I want to do is I want to discuss with you a little bit what I found interesting about them. Now, when I started this video just a few minutes ago, I started out with Satanism and the various different concepts of denominations within Satanism. The how should I say this? How should I say this? The contemplative negativity surrounding each denomination. Okay, and not all of the negativity is warranted, really, at least in my opinion. And hello, Silver Moon. And so you can't talk, but you can listen. Interesting, but cool. But glad you're here. All right. Now, the first book on Satanism is called The Lords of the Left Hand Path: Forbidden Practices and Spiritual Heresies from the Cult of Set to the Church of Satan by Stephen E. Flowers, PhD. Like you really need a PhD to get through this stuff. Seriously. And it looks like this. All right. Now, this book here has just about every one of the workings that these individuals did, from Agrippa to the founders of this, like Anton Zandler, Long, Aleister Crowley, a whole bunch of different practitioners. He talks a little bit about Lucifer and the Enlightenment, Old Nick, Lucifer Unbound type stuff. You get into the path of Satan from the Middle Ages to the Western world. You get in, was Jesus a Lord of the left-hand path? Just different views of this, including the first millennium, which how should I say this? Discusses the different point of views of Satanism. And I'm going to go into the glossary here and just read off a couple of things to you. All right. We have, and I quote, if I can turn the page here. All right. Black magic, the devil, evil, good, heretic, paradox, imminent breach or branch, initiations, the left-hand path, lord or lady of the left-hand path, Lucifer, magic, objective universe. Now, if you remember, Lilith, when we were talking last night on the phone, or we were discussing the universe and the point in the multiverse and the different layers of knowledge and hidden gnosis that one can gather throughout their life. The biggest thing is you never stop learning, and it goes right back to the onion analogy of when you master one level, you peel back that layer and you get a whole nother level to master. And it's very, very interesting, especially when you're dealing with the universe. It goes into white magic, transcendental branch, Tantrism, and such. I mean, this book has so much information running from the Eonic word, the Ages of Fire, Ahura Mazda, I was, or I was, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Anubis, Aryans, Adams, Azazel, Babylonian captivity, to baptism, Baphomet, the sigil of, Black Brothers, Black Magic, Black Mass. And that was something else you and I were discussing last night as well, the Black Mass, which is kind of ironic. You can go into the 11 Rules of the Earth, Faust. Let's see, Grace, Grigori, Alfred Rosenberg. Let's see, Satanic Bible, The Devil's Math, Satanus, Satan Wants You. That was actually a good book back in the 1980s. That was from, if I remember correctly, that book was from Lyons, if I'm not, Arthur Lyons, I think it was, that wrote that book. Very, very interesting book. I do recommend it to you. His point of views on Satanism, especially around the time of the Satanic Panic, was very fascinating. If I remember correctly, that book actually came out just before that, if I remember correctly. I want to say it was like 1994, 95 area. But I do recommend that book to you. Now, the next book on my list here is by Jules Michelet. Very good author. This man has been instrumental in recovering the ancient ways of Satanism. He's one of the main historians that have literally been working their asses off to try to find the truth about Satanism and in witchcraft. His works are very well known, much in the same way as Monteagle Summers. And ironically, these are the next two books. So the next book is called Satanism and Witchcraft. So you can actually see where they're tied together. Okay? And it looks like this. That's actually true. Edred Thurston. Very good author, actually. I do like his work. Anyways, this guy, Jules Michelet, literally writes, how should I say this? He writes almost like a story. It's like reading a children's story, but more for adults. He goes through history and mythology. And let me see here. Let's see. Chapter 12, Black Mass continued. Love and death. Satan disappears. The people is enfranchised and emboldened. The poor serf, free for once, is king for a few hours space. But his time is short. Already the night is passing, the stars verging to their setting. Very soon the cruel dawn will send him back to slavery, set him once more under the malignant eye of his taskmaker, or master, I should say, under the shadow of his lord's castle and that of the church, to whom, to the, well, you get the point. He's really a good storyteller, and he tells it much in the same way as similar to the plays of Romeo and Juliet versus Faust. You know, the play of Faust back in the 15th century. Very, very good. And like I said, I mean, if you don't mind taking it slow and reading through his work really, 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 really well, I would recommend Jules Michelet. The next one is The History of Witchcraft in Demonolatry by Montague Summers. This man I have been following for a very long time. Ever since I got into witchcraft and Satanism, when I first heard his name. And the thing with him is his work is very, very excellent. The best way to describe him is as one of the most intelligent men that I've ever had the honor of coming across. Montague Summers is one of those type of men that literally breaks it down. He returns it to the most simplistic nature. You know, I never really met the man in person, at least not yet, but I would love to meet him in person sometime. And much in the same way as Jules, Summers is one of those writers, and I'm going to read something here from you. Just let me get back here to the place where I want to be. There we go. Since today is the 25th and tomorrow is All Hallows Eve, you know, I really gotta put this one out there. And it's called The Sabbath. Okay. And I'm going to start on page 145. They not unseldom drink wine, but more often water. Okay. There are occasional records of unsavory and tasteless vans. And there is even mention of purifying garbage and carrion being placed before his evil worshippers by their master. Such would appear to have been the case at these darker orgies, when there was a manifestation of supernatural intelligences from the pit. Okay? Now you notice just what I read. Okay? It was about energy raising is what he's discussing. It is that creativity of the thought of what a Sabbath is, what a ritual is. not what it actually was. Because at the time of these trials, the time of the witches, burnings and the witch trial acts, it was more about fear. And every creak was the devil or a demon behind every rustle or scrape of a branch on a building. Okay. So when we look at this, how fear can literally transgress the human logical system and drive them into fear. Okay. Just what I read right there, that one little paragraph in a line, you can tell much in the same way as VK, thinking of what Satanism or the Black Mass really is. Okay. Without actually doing any actual research. It's just, oh, well, this is what it is. Really? Where's your proof? But now that we've discussed witches and Satanism, let's get into the elephant in the room. And yes, I just utilized my mother's terminology yet again. Must be getting old. But anyways, earlier I mentioned Raymond Buckland's work. As a British guy, he was quite stuffy. His work, his writing, very stuffy, very old-fashioned, very British, in my opinion. But it doesn't mean I don't have respect for the man because of the fact that, as a fellow practitioner, Raymond Buckland was one of those kind of guys that literally knew his shit. His shit was literally tight, okay? His book, The Complete Book of Witchcraft, can tell you a lot about witchcraft, about the practices of witchcraft. But even the way he writes it out and spells everything out for you, even though it's long-winded, he's got a lot of knowledge, and you can tell he's got a lot of experience just from that one book. He can reveal so much information in just one chapter, much in the same way as Christopher Penziak in the Temple series. I've only seen it in paperback, never in hardcover, and I don't think there is one in hardcover, at least that I've come across, anyways. But anyways, one of the books outside of the Complete Book of Witchcraft and Witchcraft from the Inside was a little book called Signs, Sigils, and Omens. Now, Raymond Buckland literally took from various different pantheons their sigils, their signs, and I'm not just talking pantheon-wise, I'm also talking traditions, religions-wise, because he even pulls from the can't even speak today. The Christians, the Rosicrucians, and witches from Hindu, Buddhism, Satanism, say for example, glyphs, alchemy, and such like that as well. And one of the best books that I would recommend to you in that case would be this one here, Signs, Symbols, and Omens by Raymond Buckland. And I'm just going to show you a couple of things here because I actually like this book, and I always refer to this book in my own studies from time to time. This is actually one of two books, really. So you see, you get a little bit of an understanding of what I mean. So I'm going to go to a different one. Native American. Okay. Let's go to some more. Judaism. Okay? But then we can go into, get in here. If I can turn the page here, it would help. Freemasonry. Okay? Let's go back even further. Characters of evil spirits. All right. But then, demonolatry. Interesting, isn't it? That even Raymond Buckland writes about demons. Very interesting if you think about it. I mean, look at that. King Belial. All right. But then you can go back even further. And you've also got zodiac symbols. Okay. And like I said, the very first thing is alchemy. And that's just in this one little book. So, I mean, right there, you can see what I mean by how he gets into just about everything. And he doesn't just touch on one aspect, he goes into multiple aspects. Much in the same way as Christopher Penziak or myself. Hell, even E.A. Quetting. Okay. Now, the last one is very thick. Now, I wouldn't say it's too thick. More like about maybe 550 pages, if that. Is another book that shows multiple different views of symbols, signs, and things that are used not only from past tense, but also today, even within the governments, such as, for an example, the Navy SEALs or your sheriff's department, your police department. You know, the badge is still shaped in a freaking star, a pentagram, and people don't put two and two together. You know, or the Coast Guard symbols, you know, the military symbols and stuff like that is all derived from occultism. So this is the second book that I spoke of that I tend to fall back on when it comes to signs and symbols and stuff like that, outside of a few other sources that I can tap into, such as Google and everything. Google just takes a hell of a lot longer to find because you got to go through various different systems and traditions, and you have to find the right combination of words just to get to what you're trying to look up. But this book is by Dr. Kathy Burns, and it's called The Masonic and Occult Symbol Illustrated. Includes 728 illustrations in itself, and it looks like this. Okay? Now, this book here doesn't really carry a lot of information when it comes to the actual symbols and everything, but the drawings are very, very interesting, such as this one right here, the Korean. Say, for an example, the old burn pots versus the all-seeing eye. Let's go over here to the government stuff. Now, check this out. This is what I mean. Notice anything similar to occult symbols? Equal armed cross, for an example. Triangle of evocation. Just to name a couple. But let's go back. Swastika. In its different forms. That predate Hitler, you morons. Yes, there's a lot of people who hate the swastika because of what Hitler did. Okay, and what he turned it into. And a lot of people do not realize that the swastika predates him. It goes back centuries within occultism. Now, let's see. Let's go back even further, and we can go into Buddhism. We can go into the lamb versus the ram. The goat. Azazel. The desert wind. And then we can get into the phoenix. Tarot card readings and everything in between, including pentagrams. Okay, so those are just some of the books that I would personally recommend to you to go out and look for and kind of delve into. Now, one of the things that I would recommend when looking at materials is find out what you're interested in. Okay, not only what you're interested in, but what you're thinking about getting into, and just look at it from that point of view. Does this item have anything that speaks directly to you? If so, then buy it. Because when I go into a store, especially to buy occult books of any kind, I always look at over everything just to see if anything catches my eye. And if it does catch my eye, then it's a matter of looking down through the book itself and find out, okay, it's caught my eye. There's got to be a reason. What is it about that book that's caught my attention? And then you can find out why. You know, as you and I have stated, we were talking last night, Silver Moon, you know, was something about we're talking about different images, different types of things that caught your attention. Okay, things that you had to go back and reread and then reference. Okay, just out of that one book. And even when I speak on something, I've got to go back in and do the same thing from time to time. But it's really a matter of focus. It's about finding out what speaks to you, find out what's calling to you, and work it that way. And if something does speak to you, then it's just a matter of finding out why it's speaking to you. And then go into what is it about that item that's speaking to you. And then from there, delve into the work itself and research it, compare it to other works and such. Now, you take Demonolatry for an example. Demonolatry, the same 72 demons of the Goetia, have been packaged and repackaged so many times throughout 2,500 years that it's been done to death. But Once you get into demonolatry and in angelology and you start finding out who's who, it's another thing that you can master. It's not about mastering them. It's about mastering yourself and learning from them to expand your horizons. Okay? They will guide you if you let them, but you have to be opened up to them. And what I find interesting, especially about Azazel, is that when I first started getting into alchemy and I started getting into the void working a long time ago, been over, jeez, about 12 years, I think, since last time I did void working. It literally caught my attention that he is the ancient darkness. Now, why was he classified as the ancient darkness? Was it because he's Jehovah's equal, meaning he's a god? Or was it because of the fact it was a name in itself? It was the definition that spoke to me. You see, even in demonolatry, you go with what works for you, what attracts you to that being. And then it's a matter of becoming obsessed with how to contact them, how to work with them, how to summon them. What's the best way to summon them? Then to, say, for example, to bring them back, so to speak. Bring them through so that you can contact them, so that you can work with them. But the biggest thing is, what kind of offering do you have for them? They're not doing things out of the kindness of their hearts. It's a business transaction. They will teach you if you work with them. It goes both ways. That barn door swings both ways. They will work with you. They will even guide you to a point before they cut that umbilical cord. And then you're on your own. Which is why many practitioners today literally will tell you have to be self-motivated. You got to become obsessed with them. You've got to work with them, build a relationship with them. As I tell my own students, I will teach you as long as you learn. But as soon as you stop learning, I will stop teaching. I will stop guiding. Plain and simple. All right. There's actually another spelling to his name, which is I-E-L, and there's also Y-E-L at the end as well. So you got 3 of the 5 names I've come across when it came to him. I can't speak to the dual entity part, but what I can speak on is the fact that Azazel is one of those deities that sits alone. He likes to be alone, and when he chooses to work with someone, he doesn't hold back. He will expect you to learn on your own. Now, the only one that I know of that has a dual personality that is basically unstable in a lot of ways is one of the higher-ups, known as Lucifer Drefakal, the ancient scribe, the pact maker. He's got a dual personality where he's ill-tempered. He's quick to anger, and he gets annoyed very easily, but he's willing to help. When you call him forth, how should I say this? He's hesitant, which is the best term to use, because he wants to make sure you're ready, but at the same time, you got to remember he's busy. So you got to make your plea and your pitch very, very quickly, and make sure that you have the proper offering for him. Otherwise, you can get a little pissy. So yeah. Anyways, so really do your homework on the demons and the angels. I mean, a lot of the so-called demons are actually angels. Before they were demons, they were angels. And what's interesting about that is a lot of these angels had different ranking systems. And at the moment, I'm actually putting together the hierarchies, or the what S. Conley Research referred to commonly as the families. Dante spoke of the hierarchies, the 7 hierarchies, which I find interesting in itself, because right there you have numerology mixed in. So again, you're going into another area, numerology. In numerology, the number 7 is equated with 7 colors, the 7 hierarchies, the 7 archangels. Okay. And 7 is actually a very positive number when it comes to a man. So you really have to take into consideration what you're working on and how you're doing it, where you're getting your information from. Now, when I do these videos, as I told you, and as I told you last night, is the point of me doing videos is that I'm looking to get in touch with those few true practitioners who are looking to rise above the diversities and the adversities of the divisions. Looking to get into the higher up magics, what is classified as high witchcraft. Working with others like myself who literally want to learn and just leave the human aspects and stupidity behind. But don't be afraid that when it comes to adversity through your work, because you will come across individuals that will attack you. You'll also find some that will betray you, but it's up to you if you want to let them rule your life, or if you want to rise above it. I've said in other videos this as well, is that a lot of people have given praise because I don't let a lot of things get to me. I tend to stay out of a lot of things unless somebody makes it personal, and then I just flat out destroy them. Or if I'm in a lazy mood, toy with them like a dog or like a cat to a mouse. Yes, Bella, I just went there. Don't give me that look. My familiar's over in a rocking chair. Well, yeah, Facebook is a bunch of drama queens, really. But there are a few good practitioners on there that are worthy of association with. I guess you could say Facebook is a lot like YouTube, or what's that other? Hell, I can't think of the name of it. My brother and I were just discussing this the other day. There's some kind of other group that was similar to Facebook. I can't remember the name of it though. But anyways, see, I have no idea what Google Plus is. I only know what Google is. But anyways, is there any questions about the books or materials that I've referenced during this video? In fact, instead of asking questions about that, I'm going to open up the floor right now, and I'm going to welcome anybody that wants to ask anything. about magical practices. And I think that would actually be pretty good because it's something that I've never done before, but I think it would be a good time to do that, which is kind of ironic. Is that the one where the owners of it were trying to do something with the blocking mechanism? I've got right now. I've got about three ring binders that are full of my notes that I've typed up. I've got PDFs that I've printed out. I've got my notes, my own studies. I've even begun typing up one of my old grimoires to put into it. And the first book is actually a book on demonolatry or angelology. And it's going to be just on the hierarchy, not only the Sigiliums, but also the deities themselves. That one should be done in the next month, so it'll be ready for publishing. Because I've been focusing mostly right now on typing everything up, I've got 28 years worth of notes and research that I've done that I'm trying to type up. And it's taken a long time to do, especially with work and family. Not mentioning appointments. But right now I'm putting them all into individual books. The three ring binders to set them aside so I know what's what. For an example, I've got one book on angels and angelology. I've mixed in with demonolatry. I've got another one that's based off Sigiliums. I got another one based off alchemy, another one based off necromancy, and I've got another one for just grimoires. Hell, I've got like 3-4 of them now, I think, just on grimoires themselves. That one's going to be pretty big, I think, and it's basically everything that most people can't even get anymore. For grimoires, like the Black Raven, for an example, the also known as the threefold coercion of hell by Dr. Faust. And stuff on just about every topic that I've studied. And I'm basically breaking them down into individual books at the moment as I'm typing them up and printing them out. And because I've got a lot of PDFs that I've uploaded into my groups and other groups, I've got to download those and I have got to print them out and actually put them in binders so that if anybody needs them in the future, I can actually scan them back in through the printer and put them onto the computer and put them into PDF profile, or just plain print them out and send them to you. But yeah, right now I've got I've got two grimoires that are filled with stuff just on necromancy, blood sorcery, and vampirism. And I know a lot of people will find those two books very, very insightful. I've actually went into the history of it and shown how not only was blood sorcery associated with it, but also vampirism. So you've got a nice little history lesson going on in one of them. And then if you get into, for an example, Sorceress Cagliestro's book of the Blood Sorcery Bibles, Volume 1 and 2, you'll literally get into a whole nother viewpoint of necromancy. I've got friends that's on Facebook and YouTube that they're nothing more than necromancers. So, I mean, that's another good thing. So you're getting 3 point of views of just necromancy and blood sorcery, magnetics, and everything like that. So, I mean, you're seeing a good amount there. And I'm not sure when I'm going to get that one put out first. I'm still really debating on which order I'm going to put them out in. I'm thinking putting out the main stuff on the hierarchy first, and then getting into the rituals, getting into the adding in the skills with the rituals and stuff like that in a second book, and then go into the actual other workings. But that may change when it gets closer to the time to publish them. No, I don't. Yeah, I've heard of his work, but I've never actually got into his. When I talk about vampirism, I spell it with a Y. And this separates the gothic lifestyle of vampirism. Now, a lot of people, they think Dracula or was it Interview with the Vampire with Lestat? Okay. They're cloaked beings who feed off blood, creating other vampires. Anyone who's ever read The Vampire Sanguine, for an example, by Father Sebastian, who is the godfather of New York covens, will learn a lot about what vampirism really is. But back in, say, for an example, 500 years ago, vampirism, or what came to be known as vampirism, was through blood sorcery. Blood sorcery is a form of rejuvenation, and it was viewed as a form of rejuvenation because of the negative side effects through necromancy, peering into all that negative void. The land of the dead had a corrosive, painful, decaying agent that inflicted the practitioners, which is why a lot of the practitioners died young. They didn't really have the understanding then, especially that of 1,000 years ago, of how to deal with this and how to counteract it, much like a flu virus to a vaccine today. So when we look at vampirism and blood sorcery, vampirism was actually introduced in a formulation of rejuvenation, because what it did was it staved off that negative impact of decay. You probably watched movies where they say the decay sets in. Like, say, for example, Hansel and Gretel with what the hell is their names? Yeah, I can't think of the actors' names at the moment. But when they're describing a witch, they looked at a woman and said, "She's not a witch. There's no sign of decay." Decay is a form of, say, for example, internal decay, a stench, a rot that sets in. And it literally destroys from the inside out. The more you utilize the negative energies of Da'at, like, for an example, Da'ath, magic, and the Klapoth, for an example, the further this would set in. It would take root and grow. Yes, Hansel and Gretel. It's a very good movie. I enjoyed it quite well, which is why I'm referencing it here as a comparison to the Rot. Now, the Rot had things like the fingernails would turn yellow. The teeth would become bad. The eyes would turn yellow. And the practitioner themselves would become ill. They would be tired a lot. They would be drained. So by the 15th century, when blood sorcery was introduced, it was a way for them to stave off that rot. It was a way to rejuvenate. It's not really a cure. It was more of the fact that it slowed it down. And then later on, as blood sorcery became associated with demonolatry and angelology, it was just another form of bloodletting. Now, bloodletting has actually been associated a lot with lycanthropy throughout the last 500 years. It was associated with a way to test how fast you heal from that disease. Whereas, say for an example, well, let's take Andre the Giant for an example. He was one of the best WWE wrestlers back in the 80s. He had, much in the same way as Abraham Lincoln, had a genetic disease that kept him growing, which is why he was so tall. And it eventually killed him. It killed them both. Okay? Now, imagine if they had a cure or something that could stave that off. Or we could do that with a flip side of things. For those who have tall families, but yet by the time they're in high school, they're not really up to par, so to speak. They'd give them booster shots or protein shots to help increase the growth rate. Okay? So instead of being 5'4", you end up 6 foot. Okay? Same exact analogy. Which is fine. You can actually do that. And that is actually something that is very good. And I'm going to get into that in just a sec. So, in the same analogy, blood sorcery or vampirism to necromancers was the exact same way. It was a way to stave off, or at least ward off, that particular infliction. It was said to be quite painful, quite hospitable, much like having frostbite about 3/4 of the way through, where you still feel your limb. Okay? Now, as for blood sorcery became associated with ritual work. The Witch of Endor is a prime example of blood sorcery being utilized in chiromancy. Chiromancy was a way to contact the spirits, much in the same way as a necromancer would do through a crystal ball or a scrying mirror. Okay, even Sorceress Cagliostro, the necromancer, speaks on this. The Munich manuscripts, the Munich handbook for the 15th century necromancer, on page, what is it, 151, 157, I think? Something like that. I can't remember exactly the page. Talks about the mirror of Lilith. Okay? The mother. Also known as the hag. Okay? Now, chiromancy was just another form of spiritual conjuration. Blood was associated with it through bloodletting. By spilling the blood on the mirror, opened a vortex, a portal, so that you could peer into the land of the dead. Much in the same way as the holiday of the land of the dead, where the veil is so thin that the dead can cross back, and that's why they leave fruits and vegetables on the graves. I concur with you on that one. She is a very good practitioner. I've got a few of her books, and I've actually practiced some of the things that she's written about. In fact, I've actually had discussions with her on her messenger on just how to go about, utilizing blood and blood tablets through freezing. Because if you think about it, by freezing it, doesn't that destroy it? But when you think about magnetizing it, it's like doing CPR to a person that drowned. Best way to describe it right there. And so, anyways, going back. So now if we go forward from this time of Chiromancy, now we've got divination. Divination is another way to do it. But even some practitioners today deal in blood sorcery. Blood sorcery is now a way to give back to these beings for their time coming across through invocations and evocations. We now give them our blood to rejuvenate them because they want to be a part of the living. Whereas in older cases, it was said, especially that of Sorcerer's Cagliostro in Volume 1 of the Blood Sorcery Bible, she wrote that you have to be careful because if they sense that you are still of the living, they will attack you. So you can see how things change over time. But blood sorcery really is... I've had numerous conversations with S. Connolly. She is one of the most intelligent demonesses, demonolatoresses, I should say, in the world today. And in my opinion, she's one of the world's leading, much in the same way as Asenath Mason through Luciferianism. And Michael W. Ford, two of the most, the two of the most intelligent ladies I know is Asenath Mason and S. Connolly, especially with their work. Now, blood sorcery is another way not only to give back to the demons and the angels, but it is also a way to summon them. It is a way to utilize in many forms today, such as hexcraft, cursing, sealing the fate of your enemies, going into spiritual conjurations, going into pact makings, deal makings, making oaths and promises in written format with any type of being. Even in ritual work today, blood is spilled. I've talked about this, how in past videos of where I was sitting there in complete silence. The only one there was, I heard a voice just behind my left ear telling me to spill blood on the altar. That's kind of freaky when that first happens to you. But if you think about it, what is most powerful? What is the solution between life and death? Water is considered healing, but it's also utilized for divination. Blood is partly water, but it's also life and death. Interesting, isn't it? So yeah, it is very, very good. Let's see. And never heard of him. But anyways, yeah, I've got several of Asenath Mason's work. They're very insightful, very interesting. Her point of views are very unique when it comes to that. So Is there any other questions? Hmm. Oh, wait. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right on that. Yeah, I think you are right on that. I didn't realize he was the one that was dating her. It wasn't until you said become a living god that it clicked. But yeah, I think you're right on that. I think I've only seen him on there once, though. Much like Frank White. Frank White's another good one that I would recommend. The Serpent of the Grail. He's one hell of a black magician. I've actually done a few methods that he's suggested on his videos. Very, very powerful, potent. Let's see. That was actually a pretty good book. Send me the link on that, will you? I want to check that one out. I like Egyptian mythology, especially the ancient ways. So, anyways, is there any other questions from anyone? Okay. Well, then I'm going to end this video. And I hope it's been intellectual. Hope it's been intelligent, enlightening. Until next time, this dark sorcerer is out. Have a good one.